Welcome everyone. How are we doing? I'm Kenneth Townsend, and welcome to Millsaps for those who are visiting. We're glad to have you here on our campus. We've got a really interesting program ahead for us today. Dominika Perry is going to be presenting on climate change. And I met Dominika a few months ago now, and we've since become friends. She's a fascinating woman with a world of experiences. One of the things to note about her resume is we have a Yale connection in common. She received her PhD in environmental economics from Yale and has been here in Jackson for about 5 years, in the Jackson area for about 5 years now, but is originally from Poland, and she might tell you a little bit about her background as well. But an absolutely fascinating woman who is going to make a really delightful and I think challenging presentation for us, and this is a timely topic, no doubt. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand things on over to Dominika. Welcome, Dominika.
Thank you so much, Kenneth. This was an excellent introduction. I feel so much better. I should actually get the tape and listen to it on a fascinating moment before I go to sleep or when I get depressed. Thank you so much for letting me speak on this definitely slightly controversial topic. Thank you for coming, especially since lately this topic has been named many bad names. Thank you for being willing to listen and hopefully having a conversation. I've been an environmental economist throughout my career, and I spent most of my time in academia, moved through different places in the US. I've been at Boston University, and then University of Kentucky, and then University of Wisconsin, and then I came to Mississippi. I didn't find a place that would be good for me for academic position, so I started consulting. I figured, never done consulting before, and they actually pay for what you do, so that was nice. And I was really interested in learning about this environment, about really beautiful, complicated, worthwhile ecosystems in Mississippi. And what I found out through my short career in consulting is that people do care about the environment, but all environmental issues are so politicized that it becomes almost unreal when you are asked to not mention expression climate change in your entire report, which is entirely on damages caused by climate change. This frustration initially just made me shut off and think, yeah, I'm just gonna keep to myself and not talk to people about climate change, and then I figured I just can't do it anymore. So about 6 months ago, I've decided that I do want to talk about climate change, and that there are enough smart and open and kind people that when we find an appropriate angle, an appropriate way of communicating, and language that can connect us, we can actually have a conversation. And we can find solutions, and there are solutions. So I've been soul searching for a while, and I found this organization which I joined, which is Citizens Climate Lobby and Citizens Climate Education. What I very quickly found out is that the word lobby in English language is also scary. So it's not that I'm from Poland, which is weird. I talk about climate change, which is weird. I'm also a lobbyist. I checked some statistics. Profession of a lobbyist is the most hated in the United States. So let me explain what that is. There are two types of lobby groups and of lobbyists. You can be a professional lobbyist, the one that gets paid and is basically a salesman who will sell whatever they pay for. You can be an oil lobbyist, you can be a cigarette lobbyist, you can be an environmental lobbyist for pay, in which case you provide a product for money and your ethical background may be questionable. Then there is a group of citizens who lobby, and they do it on volunteer basis. This is this organization, Citizens Climate Lobby, CCL, is a volunteer organization where individual citizens decided to have an impact, to find voice, to communicate with their representatives through legal, diplomatic means, just going and talking. This organization is promoting, because it's a lobby group, so it's promoting a particular solution, a solution that regulates fossil fuels. And I will tell you a little bit about that solution. But I want to tell you about many things. So in addition to specific lobby, this is an organization that actually functions all around the world. We have 350 chapters, and I went way too far for some reason. Go back. Okay, it's going slowly. And what is really key for us here in Mississippi, this organization is non-partisan. And apparently, this guy really wants to come out. Okay, let's look at the guy. This doesn't want to stay. So, this is a non-profit organization that is based on building humorous presentation that is focused on building. Is it going? Now everything is going. No, seriously. What did I do? Don't go in. Going back to my organization, Bipartisan, promoting a solution which is acceptable to both sides, and doing it in a diplomatic, kind, and appreciative way. We believe that if you are on the left side and you want to fight for the environment, you cannot ignore that people on the other side may have different opinions for a reason. We just need to learn how to listen and possibly talk to each other. This was the only way I thought I could talk about climate change in Mississippi. Since those 6 months ago, I've been to DC, I met with our representatives. I have a great group of highly intelligent members and supporters, and we are trying to spread the word and to start a conversation. It is a very difficult conversation for many reasons, one of which is climate change itself is incredibly complex. And what I'm showing you right here is just the beginning. It's just a few disciplines that are involved in the discussion at the level why we are having climate change, what causes it, what happens because of that, and what could be the solutions. Virtually all disciplines are involved in one way or another in that conversation. This creates a lot of confusion. This creates many opportunities to pick at one individual tiny little piece of information and use it as a political element. When you think about it, when I think about it, I'd like to say climate change is a scientific problem with ethical consequences and possibly economic solutions. It is not a political problem. So, one of the issues that come up with climate change is uncertainty. It's not something that we can go and say, in next year the temperature will be and the animals will go this way. We don't know. There's so many questions for which the answer is we don't exactly know. Does this mean it's not happening? Does this mean there's nothing that can be done? As scientists, some of us, we would like to believe that we have tools to approximate uncertainty, to think about probabilities, and to think about solutions based on ranges of probabilities, okay? So at every level of climate models, of climate measurement, there would be uncertainty, and the fact that it exists does not discredit the effect of climate change. So why do we have problems with climate change? Why do we have problems with CO2 coming out from burning oil and gas and coal? Is it because the industry is evil and wants to kill us all? Some say yes, but of course not. The reason why we have that problem is the reason why we have any pollution problem. And this is where my economics hat gets on. It could be defined as a problem of externalities, okay? Market is really good at allocating properly to the most efficient uses many, many different goods, except for some. And pollution is one of them. The reason why it happens is when we produce something using fossil fuels, the producer is paying for all the costs involved in the production process, except for the pollution that goes through the chimney. This pollution is not accounted for. It's an externality. It's a cost that it's imposed on all of us. So for air pollution, just pure air pollution, this would be the fact that when you produce something with fossil fuel impact, some people get asthma and some people have respiratory problems. From the climate change point of view, when you produce things using fossil fuel inputs, you impose costs on the rest of the globe equally, okay? So now, keeping that as a perspective, we can think about this as a problem that it's not as complicated to solve as we may think. If we have a problem of externalities, we can go back to economics and look at policy solutions that have been developed to mitigate that problem. Some of them are great and some of them are terrible. Each of them have many sides, but we have options. This is what I want to talk about. This is what I want to discuss. What do those options mean? What would be the consequences? Which of them would make more sense for us than others? So let's start from the beginning. I don't know how many of you are familiar with why we have a problem of climate change, so let me just go really quickly. Our beautiful Earth is covered with this thin layer of greenhouse gases. Those greenhouse gases keep us nice and toasty, not too cold and not too warm. When the sun comes in, it bounces off the Earth, but not all of it bounces. Some of it stays in those molecules to keep us at the temperature that allows us to function. Now, the latest observation was that as we've been burning fossil fuels, that layer of greenhouse gases has been increasing. Since the Industrial Revolution, it increased by over 40%. What does this mean? There are more of those tiny molecules and more of the sun rays that come in, get captured within Earth, warm up the Earth, and cause changes. What I also want to point out is that some people would say, this is just temporary, we have short measurements, there is a geological scale. So this is your geological scale. Our carbon emissions and carbon concentrations have been kept throughout hundreds of thousands of years under 300 parts per million. Right now, we are on a steep incline, we are over 400. Many scientists would tell us that this is a tipping point. This is where the changes that are occurring now are going to be with us for a long time. Also why? Because carbon is one of those things that do not disintegrate that easily. Whatever we are emitting right now is going to stay with us for hundreds of years or more. So the warming that we are observing right now is very unlikely to go down. The question is, how much more can it go before we are in serious trouble? Or maybe we already are in serious trouble. So let's look at some of the observations from recent years. We've had 17 years within the last 18 to beat records heats. We already know 2016 beat all possible records. The first 6 months were the hottest. Each month was the hottest on record. Last July was the hottest month ever recorded. Maybe there is something to it. Right now, with the 2016, we are already above the average by 1 Celsius. What the scientists are telling us is what the Paris Agreement is telling us. We should not allow warming of more than 2%, than 2 Celsius. If that happens, the changes will become catastrophic. So why should we believe that climate is changing because an economist told you so. No, these things are complicated, and in the conversation that I want to have, I want to rely on people who are specialists in their own disciplines. So we are checking with earth scientists, climatologists, and ask, what do they say? What do they think about the connection between emissions and climate change? 97% of published research says it is happening and it is human-induced. And this is confirmed by few organizations like NASA and many other professional organizations, like the American Association of Advanced Sciences, US National Academy of Sciences. When you look at the statements that they are putting out, there is no question, okay? There are uncertainties about exactly how it will warm, what exactly will happen, but science is agreeing that it is happening. So we know that climate change is happening and it's all our fault. What happens because of that? The heat goes in, and as a consequence, it's being absorbed. But as we all remember, we have the terrestrial parts and we have the water. And it happens that a lot of the heat is being absorbed by the water. That leads to changes which are not obvious. So for a long time, we were calling this situation global warming. And people were saying, you're talking to me about global warming when we just had the worst winter ever. Well, so we changed it to climate change. The overall temperatures are increasing, but as a consequence, we observe in our terrestrial ecosystems changes that could be increased heat and increased dryness, or floods, or extreme weather events like extreme snow. So I was told I cannot talk about climate change without showing a polar bear drowning. So check, I've done that. There are changes to ecosystems that are complex, that are tragic for individual species and potentially for whole systems. Sea levels are rising. Our properties on the shore are becoming less and less profitable. People are moving out from shores because water is coming. We see it specifically in Florida. There are more frequent and more extreme events like hurricanes. They are extreme floods. They are extreme winters. They are also increased activities in certain diseases which we have not seen before, and that affects human health. This is one of the angles that we don't talk very much about, but physicians, especially physicians from UMC, have a lot to say about that. It also affects our national security. What I just found out very recently are two very interesting documents. These are documents provided by national security representatives on climate change, and they are both designed to be presented to our future president and his cabinet. These documents specify why climate change is an issue for national security and what the president and his cabinet should be doing to address this issue. This is going to end up on Mr. Trump's desk at some point. I don't know what he's going to do with it. His declaration during the campaign were, some of the expressions were seriously non-parliamentary, so I'm not going to repeat them, but climate change was being called a hoax. So it's going to be interesting to see how he's going to respond to major security agencies talking about climate change as if this is a scientific fact, which it just may be. So let's see what that document actually is saying. So climate change possesses immediate risks to national security. These rapid changes in the climate are already exacerbating natural disasters, water, food, energy, and health insecurities, contributing to conditions that can lead to conflict, state instability, and state failure, straining military readiness, operational and strategy, and making existing security threats worse. What many of us don't realize is that climate change has been part of our army planning for a long, long time. Why? Because it imposes very obvious and very painful costs. They need to come and assist many more disasters than before, for which they need funds and capacity. They need to build more mobile hospitals because whatever they have right now is not enough for what is happening. They are looking and trying to foresee where the next intervention of the US will happen based on climate models and climate predictions. Why? Well, let me not go that far. When climate changes, it will warm up certain areas, and those areas are the ones that are already very poor and very unstable. So most likely, we will need to do something about it, and that costs money, okay? What we also know is scientists tell us what is the actual impact. The latest, probably 2 weeks ago, Science, from the Journal of Science article tells us that 82% of all processes is being affected currently by climate change. From individuals to species to communities, everything is being affected. Things grow smaller, things can't move the same way, the time of plants blooming is not coordinated with the migration patterns, so when the birdies arrive there, they have nothing to eat. This is well-documented, serious scientific problem. There are huge health impacts. Those health impacts would be, on one hand, from increased allergies and increased respiratory problems, but also from heat strokes, from extreme events and deaths in those extreme events, from psychological trauma of participating in those events, and from something else. These are called vector diseases. And this is important for us here in Mississippi. We had malaria in Mississippi. We're going to get malaria very soon if we don't do something about it. The increase of heat and humidity together shifts the ranges, reproductive ranges of mosquitoes that carries different diseases. Mississippi is about to get those mosquitoes, not just to come, but to stay. That's a health risk, and that's a huge monetary risk as well. So when you think about it, I'm telling you this is a scientific problem, but it affects us in a very personal way. When we have hurricanes, we lose billions of dollars, we lose lives, and some of us keep going. But let's try to think about who is affected by those extreme events. Look at those photos. These are the people who already didn't have very much, who don't have very much voice, who don't have very much economic capacity, and these are the people who get hit the most. This is an ethical issue of taking responsibility for those who directly benefit from burning fossil fuels, who drive SUVs, who fly airplanes, and those that are being hit. These are usually the ones that they don't have anything to begin with. When you look at what just happened, you probably don't even remember there was this another huge hurricane, Matthew, that didn't land on the US soil, thank goodness. It did land in Haiti. 1,000 people died. Look at the devastation. This is a place that already didn't have infrastructure and was completely leveled. Right now, because of the surge of the warm, salty waters, there's cholera in Haiti. And these events will happen more and more. It didn't hit us, and thank goodness. But let's think about it. Let's think about the overall impact that is slightly bigger than just Mississippi and just United States. What do we do before a hurricane? We evacuate, we protect, we have means of reacting to it. Most poor countries, they don't have those chances. So let's look at where those effects would be the worst. The highest heat increases will happen in areas where it's already insanely hot. When you have places where it's insanely hot, what does this mean? Nothing grows there. People are dying of starvation and diseases because there is no option for agriculture. There is no option for wealth collection. There are basically no institutions and no economies functioning. There is just permanent conflict. It's going to get hotter. More people are going to be dying, more conflicts are going to occur. What happens then? Well, people die, but some people migrate. If you think we have a Syrian refugee problem, wait a few years for the heat to help us. There are going to be millions and millions of people running for their lives, literally. And these are the places that specifically military targets. The hottest area for 3 years, 2 years, there were droughts in Eastern Africa that caused us 250,000 people to die. That's just one event. Then we had issues in Asia. We had heat waves in 2015 that killed 4,000 people. And then in April 2016, we just hit a record temperature on record ever, 124 degrees. I'm not sure how it feels. But imagine that you don't have an air conditioning and that you are living with millions and millions and billions of other people in India. So this is a map that shows you the same thing, just with more detail. And this is taken from one of those documents that I showed you before. These are this is the military summary that is supposed to prepare the next administration to deal with issues of security, one of which is climate change. These are the maps that actually military is using, trying to analyze how much more they need in terms of capacity to react. And then there is another issue. We have these beautiful economies built on fossil fuels. We built it in the US, we built it in Europe, and it gets hit, whom we hit, who endures the costs, are the already barely surviving economies in hottest areas. But when we talk about it, what I hear very often is, why should we leave? Well, I would say we built the whole economy, so there's an ethical component to it. Why shouldn't we wait for the Chinese? It's a Chinese hoax. Do you know what Chinese are doing? 2017, the same time as Mr. Trump is joining the office, they are starting tradable pollution permits, cap and trade for carbon. What's going to happen then? They're going to develop incentives we were trying to develop for people to innovate, to come up with renewable technologies for energy, and then they're going to swamp our markets. European Union already has regulations. The US and Russia don't. That may change, but we need to work on it. There's another aspect, ethical aspect. We are so concerned about where we are right now, how this is going to affect us. When I talk to people, they tell me, how is it going to affect fishing and hunting? Because that's what I care about. Well, that's a fine question. It will. The species are going to change. Your fish is going to be less, it's going to be smaller, and probably the kind is going to be less tasty. With hunting, it's complicated. There are going to be more deer, but there are going to be problems with all the ducks because the flying patterns are going to change. But shouldn't we actually think about the consequences of what we do today for the future generations, for our kids, for our grandkids, maybe even further than that? Everything that we do to the earth, to a finite resource, is affecting future generations. How do we make those allocations equitable in any way? What is the term that we are supposed to use? That's something for debate. What is not for debate is we probably shouldn't ignore them. So I scared you enough, probably. Now let's move on to the optimistic angle of it, the solutions. And this is the slide that I had for you guys when I prepared it before the election. And then I was thinking that maybe I should modify it. And then I was thinking I should really stay optimistic. Because at the end of the day, we really don't know what happened with the election and what are going to be the consequences of it. So after a lot of thinking, I figured let's treat President-elect as a new layer of uncertainty. We have a lot of uncertainty on all the models, all the inputs for our sciences on climate change. This is also a layer of uncertainty. We have no idea where his decisions will go. His statements about climate change were definitely very, very, very disappointing. But at the same time, he does unusual things. He's completely unpredictable. We have no idea. He says he wants to leave Paris Agreement, and then maybe he would actually not. So let's also remember that he's probably going to be encouraged to read this whole list provided by military of things that he may want to consider related to climate change. Okay? So if you do care about this issue, remember, which is easy to forget in Mississippi, you are not the only one. Actually, most of the military is behind us. So let's go back to the actual solutions. What can we do to fix market failure? One of the standard solutions is a subsidy. So if you like a certain energy sector, like renewables, you will give them subsidies. What does it do? That makes things just worse. Subsidies, according to any economist that I know, are really not efficient or effective in the long term. These are solutions that we should rather avoid. Usually when they are being introduced, this is for political reasons. People like to get money and make them support whomever is giving money. From an economic point of view, there's absolutely no argument for subsidies. It's like making a really bad situation much worse. So then we can fix market failure by what's called standards. These standards would tell firms what they can and cannot do. You cannot pollute more than X, no matter how much it costs you to do so. They're very effective at protecting the environment. This is our Clean Air Act. This is our Clean Water Act. These reduce the pollution to exactly where we wanted them to be. Very effective, but not very efficient. There is no market mechanism built into it. And so the firms for which it's very, very expensive to make reductions still have to make those reductions. So at the end of the day, we end up spending a lot of money to get to a point that we could have gotten to with less spendings. Okay? So standards are good for the environment. They're not really great from an economic point of view. What else can we do? We can tax them. Taxes are actually very effective. What we do is we ask polluters to pay per unit of emission. So they can adjust the amount they want to pollute based on their cost structure. What then happens? We take the money and we bring it to the government, and the government is doing something awesome with it. Or not. Or it goes to the government and we have no idea what happened. So what we effectively are doing by using taxes is we are bringing more power to the government. There are very many people who are for climate change, but they don't really want bigger government. This is the main argument that they bring for any environmental issues. We can't do it because that's going to destroy our economy. Okay? It is true that it is providing revenues to the government, and if you are highly skeptical about what will happen to those money, it's not going to be your choice. What else is going to happen with taxes? If you impose a tax that is really equal to the external costs that you are not accounting for, all of a sudden things like gasoline are going to get incredibly expensive. What does this mean? All people who already have very little will have even less. So effectively what we are doing is we are taking money from polluters and we are allowing them to transfer those costs on low-income populations. So that may not be ideal. What else happens? When all of a sudden a tax is imposed like that, some companies cannot adjust. We're going to lose companies, we're going to lose jobs. It's going to be for the greater good of the environment, but it's going to be very, very painful. Finally, there is a little thing called Grover Norquist Pledge. Many of our representatives, when they were being sworn in, they signed a pledge that said, I will never, ever, ever, for any reason, raise taxes. When I was growing up, my mom says never say never, but this is an actual pledge that many people signed, and I can tell you our Republican representatives from Mississippi signed it as well. This is an issue, but there are also ways of going around it. What is another solution? Another solution that you probably have heard about is cap and trade. It used to be called tradable pollution permits. This is the case where we define an area and we say within that area we should not pollute more than that many tons. And then that amount of tons is being distributed as permits. There are different ways of giving it to everybody who is emitting. They could get it for free, they could buy it, they could auction it off, they could get it based on how much they previously polluted. Anyway, they get those permits and then they're allowed to trade them. So firms for whom it is very cheap to abate, to reduce, they reduce much more. For those for whom it's very expensive, they're allowed to actually make smaller reduction, but overall within that bubble that we've designed, the reduction goes down. If properly designed, this is an extremely efficient and by far the best solution. But there are problems. In order to design it this way, theoretically, on the board in a classroom, and then be able to transfer it into practical environments, things get very complicated, very, very complicated. The complexities leads to issues with the trade itself. In many cases, the trade doesn't happen, the prices go up and down, the firms panic because they have no idea what the price of the permit is going to be. Then there's another thing which is called the offsets. You can actually do something good, like go and plant some trees and pollute for that. That leads to extra issues. And in general, right now, there is no well-functioning cap and trade. There is cap and trade in California, but they're having a lot of problems with it. Then there's another problem with cap and trade. It was already introduced during Obama's administration, and guess what happened? Everybody voted by party lines. Everybody who liked Obama was for cap and trade. Everybody who didn't like Obama was against it, without really giving much thought to it. So this became, again, politically loaded. That is another reason why, especially in these circumstances, it will be very, very hard to have a conversation about how to design it better. But this is definitely a solution with great possibilities. And then there are different hybrids. And one of those funny hybrids is the solution that Citizens Climate Lobby is supporting. This is one where we place a fee. But since you are my friends, I'm going to tell you it's not really a fee, it's a tax. We just call it a fee for those people who already signed the pledge so they can actually be behind it. This fee is really like a tax. So every time you pump up gas, dig out coal, and bring it to the first point of exchange, you sell it, the tax is imposed. The money is being collected. The money then goes to the government but doesn't stay there. It's a revenue neutral solution. That means we don't grow governments. That means many fiscally conservative friends of ours are able to accept it and actually like it. Citizens Climate Lobby has a large Republican caucus within us. I don't know whether they voted for Mr. Trump, but they do hold conservative values. So what happens then, the whole money is being collected, and then at the minimum cost is being redistributed back to individuals. Every individual gets a check. That check is the proportion of how many people there are and how much was being collected. The reason for this check is as follows. When you impose the tax, which we're calling a fee, what happens? You stick a stick into the economy and the waves start going. If your fossil fuels are more expensive, everything fossil fuel based is more expensive. Your gasoline goes up. With your gasoline, your utilities go up, and with that, everything going down to carrots and milk. When prices go up, who gets in trouble? We've already told you like 300 times. That would be the poor people. And that is the major problem with other solutions, the transfer of costs from everybody to just the poor people. But those checks are meant to offset the increase in prices. What then happens? There's another element of the system that is, because we just impose fee, which is a tax, on all the goods, then what happens to the exchange? And we are in a disadvantage. The idea is when the goods go out to a country that doesn't have regulation, then the fee is being taken out. So the goods are not being overly expensive and the producers are not going to be hit. When the goods come in, if they're coming from places that do not have regulations, then the fee is being imposed. So we are not having dumping prices from India that doesn't have regulations and could sell us things very, very cheap. So the idea is to start very gradually to allow firms to adopt, to put it on their books that their costs will increase every year by a small amount. So they can make adjustment, they can invest in alternatives, they can invest in more effective, efficient technologies. And then what happens? Well, we can evaluate each of those based on emission reduction, what happens to jobs, what happens to GDP, what happens to health and individuals' income. And what we do see is that under the fee and dividend, within the first 10 years, this is all happening slowly. Nobody is going to completely eliminate fossil fuels initially. So within 10 years, the concentration go down by 31%. Within 20%, within 20 years, 50%, half of the emissions goes down. What happens to jobs? Whenever you hear for climate change, everybody thinks, oh my gosh, you're going to take my car away, and people are going to lose jobs. No, apparently not. Jobs are going to be created under this solution. Why? Think about what's going to happen when people who don't have huge amounts of money get that check. What do they do? What do I do when I get a check? I go shopping. That's what most people do. Retail, healthcare, services. That's where the money is going back. As a consequence, it works as a stimulus. It creates more jobs and actually increases GDP and is an encouragement. As you may remember, but maybe you don't, in 2008, everybody received a check when the economic crisis started. And the reason for that check was not any other than to provide a stimulus, to get people to start buying and start moving again. So we can actually reduce climate change and stimulate the economy, despite for what we've heard for a long, long time. Lives would be saved, of course, and it would be about 230,000 lives saved over 20 years. GDP will grow. The growth is expected to be 70 to 85 billion on average every year. and within 20 years it's going to be almost $1.4 trillion. So that's good. And there are people on both sides of the aisle with great experiences and expertise that think this is a good idea. So don't trust just me. Remember that guy? You most probably don't remember. But Mr. Schultz has been a very, very close advisor to a Republican president. He is on the board of CCL. He thinks this is a market-driven solution that solves an actual ethical and scientific problem. On the other side of the aisle, we have on the board also probably the most famous climate scientologist, James Hansen, who understands exactly the science part and who is very encouraged by the economic part. Then there are endorsers. They are Nobel Prize winners, and there are people who hopefully will soon win the Nobel Prize. That's a guy that I worked with when I was at Yale, so I'm rooting for him. He's one of the biggest names in environmental economics and climate change. These are people who are saying that tradable pollution permits, cap and trade, are just too complicated to be practical at this point, but we do need a solution, and it should be a tax which is revenue neutral. Who else endorses it? Have you heard about Exxon? Exxon likes us. Why? Because, I don't know what they think right now, but my line used to be, they know something is coming. They would love no regulations whatsoever. But if there is any regulations, they would like to be regulated in a way that doesn't get them out of business, that allows them to adjust. BP is in favor of it. And of course, many, many healthcare leaders and institutions. In the Wall Street Journal, a few months ago, there was an article where Exxon stated officially that they absolutely understand and agree that climate change is happening, is man-made, and that fossil fuels should invest in alternative strategies, and they are willing to do so. So, what can we do, especially now? Especially now when we talk about all of those issues keeping in the background that in January, the person who is going to lead our country may just say, we should completely ignore it because it's not true. We can do what this whole system is designed to do. You can actually express your will as an individual. And if there are enough of us being educated and being diplomatic and at the same time loud, they just may respond. If there are going to be enough people who organize and in a peaceful and diplomatic way present logical arguments and ask for solutions, representatives will respond. One of the things you could do is you can join CCL. There is a group here in Jackson. There are other groups in Mississippi that just started. There are many, 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 many groups all across the country. I don't want to force you and tell you that CCL is the best thing, but if you feel that what I said about climate change is touching you in any way, this is the time to do something. This is the time to let your voice be heard. I know we are all sometimes discouraged, especially lately, but we should also be encouraged. CCL just been experiencing a huge surge of interest. There have been thousands of people that just joined. They probably were not from Mississippi, but those people who are thinking, oh, you know, it's going to be okay, there are enough people who are active, finally realize if we don't speak up, others will. So thank you so much for listening. If you are interested in learning more, I have a little sign-up sheet where you can come and give me your email address, and then I can meet with you or send you information, and you can get involved or you can get educated. You can find out more information about climate change. And please ask questions. I probably left a little bit too little time, but I have issues with talking too much. So please, any questions?
Great, thanks. Let's give Dominika a hand real quick. All right, great. We've got about 10 minutes for questions. So.
Yes.
your model says, and emissions going down. If we're consuming more goods, someone's producing those goods. How do we produce those goods without burning more fossil fuels?
There are alternative energy sources for production. And what will happen is right now, we are functioning under a skewed cost structure. The skewed part is the externalities. So fossil fuels is a cheap input, cheap energy input. Solar, wind, any other alternatives are expensive in comparison. If you impose a regulation that makes it as expensive as the actual cost of it should be, when you internalize the externalities, all of a sudden there is a huge incentive for R&D for developing and mastering the already existing renewable sources, plus the renewable sources all of a sudden are competitive and are being used for production.
So my concern comes with the term all of a sudden, because in order to make this work, you have a very gradual step up in the carbon tax.
Yes, so that is built in, right? This is built in, and the estimate, so every year we start from $10, then we make it 20, then we make it 30. And every producer puts it on their agenda. If they are not able to make any adjustments the first year when it's really cheap, it's completely fine, they're not going out of business. And so what I don't have, but the model that we were using, and of course it's one of many models one can use, it's a regional macroeconomic model that shows how the composition of fuels is going to change over time after we introduce fee and dividend. So from heavily fossil fuel combination, we're going to very gradually and slowly change. What will go out relatively soon is coal. What will stay with us for quite a while is going to be natural gas. Okay, so this is a very pragmatic solution. Nobody is asking about shutting things down overnight, because then exactly that will happen. That there were models run on imposing the exact tax that should be placed on fossil fuels overnight. That means shutting down large number of businesses, losing jobs, and just in general not going in the direction where we want. So this one has that gradual element built into it. Am I answering your question?
Other questions? Yeah.
You're in an extraordinary place, Mississippi. You're talking
I love it.
about this. Well, so is everybody here. We are exploring our own environment. We've certainly seen changes over the years. We've seen the Mississippi River, for example, or Katrina, that nature is pretty powerful, whatever you try to do. We've had several hundred years of trying to balance and struggle. Yet we must be one of the most hostile places to your message.
Yes.
That nothing is needed and anything we do might make it worse.
Yeah. What I find here in Mississippi is the hostility is very pronounced, but if we are using the methods of being kind and asking for a conversation, we all of a sudden are able to have one, okay? And what I'm trying to communicate is this. I think a lot of the statements that we hear in Mississippi are because everything is being perceived upside down. Because anything environmental means I'm growing the government. The government is trying to get my money, and whatever the evidence is there is probably not real. If we actually provide more education, that's my big thing. How do we tell people to make a statements about climate change if they have no idea what climate change really is and what this means? So if we actually start talking about climate change as a scientific fact at universities, at schools, and we present the whole spectrum. We bring people with arguments that are denialists, and let's have a conversation, civil conversation. we can all of a sudden see a change, where this is not a political issue, where sometimes people don't even hear anything. They see climate change, and that is the end of my pitch to them. They don't want to talk. But at the same time, can I tell you, I was just talking with my friends. If I were in Washington State or in California, there would be 20,000 Dominikas talking about climate change and probably getting at each other over a tiny little bit of the policy proposal. When I'm here, I feel like there are enough good and kind and open-minded people that maybe we can make a difference. That's my take.
I find it very encouraging that you're here, Millsaps is having this talk.
We are extremely grateful that Millsaps is having this talk, especially at that time, which I understand may be very difficult.
We've got time for probably a couple more questions.
Yes.
How feasible is it, especially like public opinion and also the environmental impact of nuclear energy, especially in the South, the areas where it's like earthquake prone? Can you speak about how nuclear power, how efficient that is environmentally, and also how it's received?
I am smiling. I am smiling because this goes on tape. So on tape, I have to say, I'm going to tell you, because I know you're a smart man, I'm going to answer these questions as Dominika, a PhD environmental economist, not CCL. What I'm saying has absolutely nothing to do with CCL. CCL is lobbying for a solution which will allow the market to decide which alternative non-fossil fuel energy sources are going to dominate the market. We do not promote any of them, and we do not say anything for or against. Now, I got into a lot of trouble from discussions about nuclear energy. Nuclear energy, when you look at the numbers, is a very safe energy. It's a very safe economic energy source when you look at the numbers. But then there is the question, and this is a very important question for policy solutions. How do you establish solutions? If this is most effective and most efficient, do you go with it if people are scared? That's an open question. There are hundreds and thousands and millions of people who are terrified of issues with malfunctioning of nuclear facilities, as well as issues of waste and how to store the waste the way that provides us with guarantees. I say at this point, this is by far the most competitive energy source, but whether it should be promoted further, I don't have an answer. I know that people are terrified of it, and we don't have to be rational about our fears to make them relevant. So that's my take. Again, private, no CCL.
All right, we've got time for one more, maybe.
Oh, okay. My question is more on an individual, smaller scale. And there's been a lot of discussion that people and what they can do to impact the environment and climate change, and around eating less meat because the production of livestock contributes a great deal to greenhouse gases and such. So can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So CCL started when one guy was trying to figure exactly that. It was some 5 years ago. He was terrified by the scientific evidence, and he was trying to figure out, okay, absolutely, meat production is really, really bad for millions of reasons. It's horrible for water. It's horrible for energy use. It tastes so delicious. It's also usually sometimes the mass production of beef especially is not necessarily humane. So this, if you want to make an individual impact by cutting red meat, that's going to be good at any level. If you want to drive less, if you want to use less electricity, if you want to buy an electric car, it's all great. But you know what? If you constrain your life and live like the perfect Earth citizen, the impact is going to be tiny. Where you can make a huge impact is call your congressman, call your senator, and make a systematic resolution to the problem. Because the consumption of fossil fuels doesn't come from cows or from, well, cows have other problems. They also emit methane, which is also really bad. But what I'm saying is the changes in our daily routines are important, but the impact proportionally to making a phone call or sending a letter to our representative to provide a systematic solution is very small and highly costly. So for many other reasons, I should not be really now lobbying against beef, but cows are beautiful animals. Beef is really highly non-environmental, and a huge issue in addition to fossil fuels is also water. And water scarcity and the amount of land and the amount of biomass that they consume on a daily basis. But to answer your question in the most honest way, is all of those little things that we can do are great. I can't wait when they sell Tesla for $30,000, that's all that I can afford, and I'm waiting that my car is not going to break before that. I would love to drive an electric car. And I'm hoping that if we push for a regulation, what will happen? All of a sudden, there is going to be money and incentive to make those cars cheaper and more available. We already have many of those technologies. So for an individual impact, my own choice, and that's why I'm telling you that, would be careful how you live on every day basis. But at the same time, make sure that your voice is heard by those who can magnify that impact.
Great, thanks. Let's give it up for Dominika one more time.